Alright, to prepare your cup when you're done with it, you actually want a decent amount of resin left in the cup if possible. If you need to use it, but if not, not. You'll notice this is getting gummy. You can see on the top of my brush there it's gummed up. I'm spreading it deliberately around the side of my cup. I want a pretty thick layer around the side of my cup, and then I just leave the chip brush in the cup to act as a handle to pull this out. Then we just let it dry. If you put enough epoxy resin on one of these Bondo spreaders, after it dries, you can just peel the whole thing off. You can actually see and read the Bondo logo there, and basically this whole thing is basically clean except for a couple of pieces of epoxy that just hang out in the letters. Then on the back side, you can actually read China right underneath that hole. Well, I'm not sure if you can, the thing, but so that's how you get this thing nice and clean. So you can see here, I left quite a bit of epoxy in the bottom of that one, at least at this edge. It was less at this edge, and I didn't have a chip brush or anything to put into it, so it'll make it a little harder to get out. Let's see here. We also have some epoxy on the outside, because I was pouring out of this and it dripped a lot. So you can see the epoxy starts flaking off the outside. And it's pretty easy to get the epoxy off the outside, but it's also pretty much not necessary because you're mixing epoxy on the inside. But it's nice to just get it off. You might have to redo these marks if the epoxy sticks to your marks and pulls it off. So you want to do that if you need to. So with this, I've also pretty much loosened the inside film, but I want to push on the bottom. So I'm pushing with my thumbs on the bottom, trying not to bend the sidewalls too much. And if you deform it enough, you'll disconnect the bottom of that entire plug of epoxy out, and then when you pull on the sidewalls, you might be able to pull the whole thing out without ripping the sidewalls. The sidewalls are pretty thin, so they're also pretty weak. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. And we even got the ring at the top there. You can see there's the ring around the top of the inside. We got all the sidewalls and the epoxy plug on the bottom. And the only thing left here is maybe a little bit of epoxy on the bottom edge to pull off. And so the inside of that bucket is perfectly good to use again, even though the outside looks kind of grody because we have epoxy running down the outside of it. But the inside, all that epoxy has been pulled completely out, and it's basically as good as new for mixing purposes. Didn't have a chip brush to leave in this guy, so I just left my glove in, one glove in. Give me a little handle. Boom. Inside's good as new. I'm getting pretty good at getting all of the epoxy out of my mixing containers as a single piece, so I know that the mixing container on the inside is perfectly good. I just throw out the chip brushes. With these guys you can pop the epoxy right off. These little stir sticks are nice. They're all plastic, and it's some type of super non-sticky plastic, super smooth, so really much nothing can get a hold of it. So you just kind of wave it back and forth a bit, and then you can peel layers of stuff off of it. The glass bead epoxy sticks on a little better than regular epoxy, but it'll still come off with enough friction and back and forth motion. Peeling action. little bit missing right there, but other than that, doing pretty good. I'll get all the stuff on the outside off. There's some of that inside we're missing. All pretty good. Here's another example of getting resin out of your mixing bowl nicely so that you know the inside of your mixing bowl doesn't have any little chunks of resin left on it. So this right here is how you get a perfectly clean epoxy bucket. If you squish the things back and forth like that, break it all off, maybe leave a paintbrush in so you have good adhesion to the bottom. And when it pulls out, you got all of the epoxy off all the walls and the bottom. So the interior of your bucket is basically pure and good again. If you have the right amount of epoxy left in your cup, about that much there, and you have enough left on the edges, after crinking your cup around, you can pull the whole thing out as a single piece